What's up, you guys? All right, let's try this one more time. I had a little audio issue last time, so I'm gonna redo the whole video. So anyway, yeah, I got COVID. Let's chat about that for a little bit. We'll take some questions from the live chat as well. And then I wanna go over a really important, I think, paper that was written out of Johns Hopkins facilities in September about kind of who gets COVID and who does well, and how to predict who's not going to do well and who's going to progress to severe disease and or death. Because I think that's really important. That's one of the things that I thought of as soon as I got COVID. I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna die from this. So because I have known about this study and have been looking at the data since this all started, I wasn't too concerned, but certainly was in the back of my mind. So I think it's important to talk about. Anyway, let's see if this chat is going to work out this time. And you guys let me know if you can hear me okay. And if you can, give me like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Got a little delay here. Anyway, I will go over kind of what I felt during COVID. So my symptoms started like the 3rd or 4th or something like that of October. Fevers and chills at night, just got really sweaty, and just pretty much had fevers and chills for like 7 to 8 days. The first 3 nights I was waking up in the middle of the night with sweats. Other than that, I had a headache. In the mornings, I would feel like I was hungover, and take some Advil and Tylenol. That went away. I felt okay during the daytime, but then at night, I had a tough time sleeping for about 3-4 nights. After that, I slept okay, but I still was getting hot and cold flashes and stuff. And it's not because I'm going through menopause. I was pretty sure. No, I got tested the morning after I started feeling fevers and chills. I was actually on call, so I went in, had a rapid test. It was positive, so then I switched out my call with my colleagues. So this is actually day 10, I think, for me of quarantine. So yeah, so I fixed the audio there, hopefully. I look ill. You're not supposed to say that. Anyway, so what I really want to talk about is this study right here. So this was, let's go up here. Model predicts severe disease in those with COVID-19. And this is from Medscape. You know, kind of like what I want to call more real health news than like CNN and Fox and all those things, those media outlets have. They have their health news, but I feel like it's highly skewed. Basically right now, most things that you read are highly biased, so it's really difficult to kind of pick out what's non-biased and what's not. I like this article. I'm going to talk about the paper. So this is Medscape. They published about this Johns Hopkins article, or this publication. Basically, data was gathered from 832 consecutive patients with COVID-19 between March 4th and April 24th at Hopkins. 5 different Hopkins hospitals in Maryland and Washington, D.C. So what they try to do is predict, or get a model to predict who is going to do well and who's not, and who's going to go on to severe disease and death. So the authors say the model can predict likelihood of severe disease as defined as needing high levels of oxygen. High levels of oxygen is not 2 liters of nasal cannula. High level of oxygen support and or a breathing machine, or death from 5 to 90%, sometimes flagging that a person is 18 times more likely to progress to severe disease than another patient with COVID-19. And by the way, sorry, my voice is kind of not that great, so I'm trying. I never had a sore throat though. A lot of people other people got that. I didn't get any GI symptoms. I had no nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, anything like that. So headache, fevers, chills, that was it. So what they developed are kind of some patients that are like scenarios, and then they gave a percentage in this patient, like how likely they were to progress to severe disease or death. So for this patient, 81-year-old black woman with diabetes, hypertension, BMI of 35, kind of high, respiratory rate of 32. This is the initial presentation of admission, high CRP, and they have a probability of progressing to severe disease or death of 80% to 92% and 96% on day 2, 4, and 7. So that patient is kind of like the things that we've been talking, or I've kind of mentioned before: obesity, hypertension, diabetes. But on admission, they had a high respiratory rate and a CRP. In contrast, authors found a 39-year-old Latin man, BMI of 23, so fairly thin, no comorbidities, no fevers, probability of progression of 3, 5, and 5% by days 2, 4, and 7. So very low percentage or probability of progressing to severe disease by day 7. And they were saying the first 2 days, it's 85% accurate, and over the first week, it's about 80% accurate. So this is really interesting, and I have the paper pulled up here. But basically what this is saying is that when somebody presents to the hospital, you can look at their comorbidities, their BMI, and the status, like fevers, chills, their respiratory rate, CRP, a few other things that's in the paper, and decide whether this patient is going to go on to having severe disease or death. Of course, the other thing is age, because that's a major risk factor as well that this paper found. So this is the paper itself. We'll go up here. And this is patient trajectories among persons hospitalized for COVID-19. This was published September 22. Basically background, risk factors for progression of coronavirus to severe disease or death are underexplored in US cohorts. So what they're saying is nobody's really looking at this too much, and they were just telling everybody that COVID is going to kill you. And I think that doing that is the same as saying, hey, 25-year-old kids, don't walk on a shaggy carpet because you might fall over and break your hip and then die in 30 days, which is stupid, right? So all disease processes usually have a cohort of patients who do well and do not so well. And in trauma, we see this. We had my residency program wrote a paper called Trauma, a Chronic Recurrent Disease. And we typically don't think trauma is chronic or recurrent, but it is, because certain patients continuously have recurrent problems with trauma because of the decisions they make. And that's a whole other problem of why they make those decisions and why some people don't make those decisions that lead themselves into trauma. But the point is there's specific patients who get problems or severe problems based on a lot of different things, and it can be their age or their physiology. Most of the times their physiology, but in trauma sometimes it's actually their decision making. So anyway, the objective is to determine the factors on hospital admission that are predictive of severe disease or death. It's a retrospective study, 5 hospitals in Maryland and Washington, D.C. There's 832 patients. Here's the dates: March and April 2020, follow-up through June 27. Patient trajectory and outcomes categorized by the World Health Organization COVID-19 disease severity scale. Primary outcomes were death and composite of severe disease or death. So the results, basically, median patient age 64 years, 47% were women, 40% black. Now this is different than the overall US population because this is in Baltimore, or a lot of it is in Baltimore. Obviously has a higher African American population. 21% were nursing home residents. Among all patients, 131 died, and 694 were discharged. So right there's 16% died, and 83%, and these are hospitalized patients. These are not people that just are walking on the street with that. So So 523 had mild to moderate disease, 171, 20% had severe disease. 66 deaths, 50% were nursing home residents, which is very interesting. And actually, I pull this other graph up here, as we can see, while 7% of the country's cases have occurred in long-term care facilities, 40% of the country's pandemic fatalities are in long-term care facilities. So Colorado 50%, Nevada 18, Oregon 49, Washington 50, Idaho 53, Iowa 53, Illinois 53. So high percentage of patients that die are from nursing homes. So that's a very, That is a very specific cohort of patients that don't do well and die of this disease. A very high percentage of them are in nursing homes. So again, to say, holy crap, everyone's going to die of COVID is irresponsible. It's also irresponsible to say you should ignore it because it's a bullshit disease and it's a hoax. So both things are irresponsible. So let's go back to this. So essentially, they developed, here it is, the patients had markedly different probabilities of disease progression based on the age, nursing home residence, comorbid conditions, obesity, respiratory symptoms, respiratory rate, fever, absolute lymphocyte count, white blood cells, hypoalbuminemia, which is your protein, like are you malnourished or not, troponin level, like are you having a heart attack, and CRP, like are you having a huge inflammatory response. This is similar to sepsis. People that have a really bad inflammatory response do poorly in sepsis, and same, I think they're saying, with COVID. So using only factors present on admission, a model to predict in-hospital disease progression had an area under the curve 85, 79, 79% at day 2, 4, and 7. So those, if we take all this stuff into account, we can essentially, or Hopkins can essentially figure out with an 85%, 79%, 79% accuracy at day 2, 4, and 7 if you're going to get severe disease or not. So I think this is pretty significant, and I wanted to like put this out there more to people to say, like, there's a very specific cohort of people that do poorly with COVID, and we should be paying attention to them. And I think we could make better decisions as a group in the United States and states and counties and cities if we paid more attention to this and say, okay, well, these are the patients that are problematic, like the elderly patients. So I can go into this 50% of patients who die are in nursing homes. Well, what are those ages, and which of those patients are in trouble? Those are the ones that are not so much their age, but their physiologic status. And if their physiologic status is worse, are they more frail? I talked about this on another video. Are they more frail? They're going to do worse. And so if we put more resources into protecting those patients instead of all the resources go into protecting all the people, like that's a huge expense in multiple different ways, then you can focus your resources on the right patients. And I think that's a smarter way to go. So I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say. Essentially, that's the crux of the video. So I'm going to take some questions from you guys right now. Let's see. Get well. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Do we have any questions? Questions though. You had COVID too. The camera and lighting is great. Been working on that. Sorry, I screwed up the audio though earlier. So. This is a good question. How would I compare my experience to Trump's COVID experience. And I think, I wasn't actually going to talk about this, but I think I can. It was obvious to me that he did very well and didn't have, like really quickly, either 72 hours or so, maybe 4 to 5 days after his initial diagnosis, he was doing really well. And the reason I say that is because I see patients' initial diagnosis, he was doing really well. And the reason I say that is because I see patients all the time, and I can see patients who are very sick and weak and are not doing well with how they're talking and their attitude and their voice. And his voice was very strong, and he looked pretty good on camera. But I will also say that he got probably all the drugs that were possible to get, and medication is amazing. And if you get the right medication, you could feel like $1 million. And so it's hard to say because you don't, obviously I haven't seen him 24/7. I'm not seeing him when the medication wears off and they give him another dose or whatever it is, all that stuff. And so I would say comparatively, mine was longer, and I think it was a little bit tougher just because I didn't have all that other medication. And so I just had Tylenol and Advil, and that was kind of it. I don't know I don't know if I would do better with the medications he got, or he got a lower viral load, or his immune system is better, or whatever it is. I'm not really sure, but I think that it seemed that mine was longer, and my fevers and chills and symptoms and stuff like that were more intense for longer. Let's put it that way. Mine essentially was a flu. I've had flus before. It wasn't the worst flu. It wasn't the easiest flu, but at no time did I have respiratory symptoms and think that I was going to die. And if we look at this data from Hopkins, then you can kind of predict that too, that I shouldn't have any problems. I don't have any comorbidities. I don't have a high BMI. I'm not elderly. I didn't come from a nursing home. So all those things say that I shouldn't have progressed to a severe disease. So, man, I really appreciate you guys in the chat right now. Thanks, Nick. I appreciate that. Which symptoms was I struggling with most? My headache was the worst, I think, because it just never went away for like 7 days. And that was kind of just, after a while, I was like, oh man, you forget what it's like to not have a headache. Any chest pain? I think I initially had a little bit of chest discomfort, but never really any respiratory symptoms. No sore throat. I never had a sore throat. I know some other people that was their main symptom. I can't talk, my voice is hoarse today, but it's not sore. Any advice for a medical student with regards to approaching friends and family members who are not taking the virus as seriously as they should? So this is interesting because I think the reason that a lot of people are not taking the virus serious is because of the polarity of the sides in our political system. And it's unfortunate because even myself, at this point, I don't trust either side. And when one side says something, I just say, okay, why are they saying that? Why is it biased? And then the other side says something else, of like, why are they saying that? And to pull data and figure out which one's right is a big deal. And not everybody has the capacity to do that, and the time, the effort, all that stuff that they want to do it. And number two, I think not everybody really can look at scientific data and decide which ones are worth putting weight on and which ones are not. So I think that's the problem. It's not that anybody's stupid or wrong, but it's our system that has kind of like screwed screwed your family, if you want to put it in that way. But I don't think fighting with anybody is the answer. I do think that maybe pointing these things out, that everybody's biased and this is why we're having a difficult time, and explaining it that way would be better. And I think pulling papers like this from Hopkins and saying, and getting real data and saying, 50% of patients who die actually are from nursing homes, and not saying that, oh yeah, we can let those people die, it's not that big of a deal, but which people are at real risk and which people are not at real risk, and who should we protect and who should we put more effort into protecting. So I think going about telling your family and friends those kind of things are more kind of useful than just saying, you're an idiot, you got to put your mask on, you're so wrong, all that stuff. Nobody wants to hear they're wrong. Even if they are wrong, they don't like it. So I think that's the way to go for that. I did not have loss of taste or loss of smell. Go look at this data from this Hopkins paper. It really tells a different story, or tells a good story about who we should be protecting, where the resources should go, and maybe spread that word. And I think that's probably the best message of this video. All right, you guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, share, all that stuff. I'll see you in the next video.